Deadlifting loads the low back, and it doesn't exactly mean that you're in pain. You might just have awareness of your low back. It might be tightness, tension. Some people feel like a big pump of their erectors, and all of those things are not exactly telling us that something is broken or damaged. So it's not so much that pain equals damage or that damage equals pain. They're actually very poor indicators of each other in the real world. However, what we do know as coaches and lifters is that changing our position changes the load and the tension response of the muscles. So if we can learn to move differently, we can learn to manage the tension and tightness that we're feeling, especially in the low back with deadlifts. So here's 4 simple things that you can look at with your own lifting and programming to improve your tightness in your low back. First, your form probably sucks. Again, it's not so much that certain positions cause injury, but certain positions definitely add tension to subgroups of muscles. And if we are using the same strategy to load the low back, and this would be an extension drive where your ribs flare out and you try to lift the barbell off the ground, it definitely will add tension into your low back. And sometimes moving away from this position and learning to lift with your ribs down in place and having some ab tension and a better brace can help offset some of the load that's going directly into your low back, creating the tightness that you're feeling. Which brings us to point number 2, which is learning to brace and the brace position of actually using your diaphragm to create intra-abdominal pressure. Bracing and allowing that pressure to be felt within the abs is a fantastic way to share tension around the trunk muscles. And when we do it well, it means that we're actually removing this extension drive that we discussed in point 1. When we're looking to brace, what we're actually trying to do is get our ribs down in space. We're not looking to crunch over or hunch. The idea that I like to use is you shouldn't lose height when you're going into your braced position. But if we do it correctly, what we're actually getting is the obliques to pull the lower rib cage down. And when we have that oblique tension and hold it in place, when we take a nice good inhale, it allows leverage for the diaphragm to descend and actually increase pressure in the abdominal cavity. And then that is what intra-abdominal pressure becomes, and that is how the brace changes the loading strategy around the trunk and the low back specifically. If you do this correctly, it means that we can take tension off the low back because we are no longer extending, as well as placing more tension around other structures of the trunk. Our bracing brings us into point number 3, and that is when you learn to brace well, all of a sudden you'll start to realize the capacity that your hips and your legs have in order to produce force and lift the barbell up. The leg press is actually no different. When we pull ourselves into the bar and pull the slack out and create that brace and create that tension, that position is what allows our legs and our hips to push down into the ground. So next time you're deadlifting, I want you to think that you're on a leg press. You pull yourself into position, you get nice and tight, and if we have that good trunk brace feeling, it will allow us to push the floor away rather than lifting the bar up. We're trying to use our legs and our hips for the deadlift. We're not trying to lift with our back. So now that we've unpacked the technical stuff of how to execute the deadlift, let's look at the program itself. And with this understanding that our positions and our shapes load certain muscles, it means that we need to have a bit more of a zoomed out view of the overall programming structure. And there's a good chance that if you're somebody that feels a lot of back tension when you deadlift, that you also like to use your back and your erectors when you do other lifts in the gym. And this is quite common for things like squatting, where we come out of the hole and let our rib cage drive forward, or bench pressing, where we set up in a very big extended position, or even things like our overhead press or our RDLs, or even some of the machines that you do. If you have this strategy of extending the back aggressively, there's a good chance that you're using it in a lot of different exercises throughout the program. So I want you to look at your program structure and identify the positions and the loading strategies that are using this large extension driver, and either change those exercises. Simple fixes can be things like overhead presses should be done seated with our feet up. That position reduces the ability to extend and load the low back. For things like our RDLs, we can start to think about the bracing position and the oblique tension that we're trying to bleed into the actual deadlift, and using it as an accessory to hold position and hold shape. For things like squatting, using SSB bars or anterior loaded squats push our mass backwards and actually close the abs off and bring more tension to the abdominals. It's probably why you're feeling a lot of abdominals when you do things like front squats. The position changes the tension response and removes it from the low back. So I want you to take a look at your program and identify some of the quick changes that you can make that will remove the extension driver to the low back. With all of these changes, I can guarantee that you're probably going to be feeling better in the gym without as much back tension, and your strength and your performance will go through the roof. That's it for today. If you have any questions, drop them down below. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.